My guests today, Joe Van, Deman and Colin King. As they say on their website, they're not private equity. They're a group of Midwesterners working to build a collection of great companies. They acquire and operate private companies, partner or co-invest with operators of private companies, and invest in public companies. Today, we are going to cover the private side of investing. Thanks a lot for coming to the HoldCo Builders podcast, Joe and Colin.
Thanks for having us.
You started with a small amount of savings and SBA loan. You created Circle City Capital Group and began acquiring operating businesses back in 2019. Today, you own and operate 8 brands under 4 operating groups. You've had a very busy first 5 years since starting back in 2019. Before getting into all that, what were you doing before founding and running Circle City Capital Group?
Go ahead, Joe. Kick it off.
Yeah, so I started my career working at Google, and I'm non-technical in nature, so I was standing up new sales and customer support operations. Following that, I spent a few years in early stage technology companies, but I just really found that I didn't like being VC backed and having companies that are really trying to find that revenue model. So I decided to lean into more businesses that were established and had a proven market fit. And that's what led me to investing in small businesses.
Yeah, my background, I was a CPA, came out of college wanting to do accounting. That was during the financial crisis that I came out of college. So, it kind of led me down this path of wanting to do something a little more forward looking. I sat for the CFA, went to go work at an investment firm, and I did that for about 6 years. And that was the time that Joe and I met and had this shared enthusiasm for being entrepreneurs. Didn't really want to build something from scratch. So we started kicking deals back and forth, and we probably spent at least a year looking at deals, just talking about them, thinking about them, projecting them, everything from startup ideas to established companies before we bought our first company together. So, I kind of the de facto finance accounting side of the equation, and Joe is much more of a operator, marketer, kind of the COO type mindset.
I was just posting it the other day on Twitter that, and that's what I believe, people building SaaS companies, people working for VC-backed businesses, they're probably the smartest entrepreneurs out there. And I really enjoy listening to those interviews myself and trying to gather the knowledge and the skill set and replicate that on traditional businesses. So my question to Joe, why still you decided to go from tech businesses to those traditional businesses and changing your career pretty much, because this is a huge shift, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from my perspective, one, I was born and raised into a family of people that own small businesses. So from an early age, I was familiar with that. I liked building and operating in that type of environment. And two, I think, working in technology companies, the mindset that was preached to me at Google and really embedded in me is a mindset of growth and scale. And I think that's where we see a lot of opportunity with these small businesses that may have been around for a generation or two. A lot of times they've been lacking the investment in technology and automation and process systems and things like that, where we could really take a business and scale that. So while most entrepreneurs are thinking about my business, I may grow it 5% or maybe 10% next year. The mindset that I approach it with is how do we 10x this business? How do we get to a different level of operations? And I think that's proven valuable in looking at a lot of the businesses that we've considered and invested in to date.
What was how was the early conversation? Because I know a lot of people who would like to get into this buying and building traditional businesses, but when you actually see how not too many people are willing to do that, not too many people are willing to leave their jobs and actually do that. So who approached who in your case, and how was the first conversation that okay, let's go after those traditional businesses and let's actually try to build something?
We joke about who has to tell this story. Joe, is it your turn or is it mine? So Joe and I actually met on Craigslist, is where we originally found each other. So we had this thesis that business owners in local areas, if you don't know what to do with your company, the first place you might go is to Craigslist, right? Put up a free ad and say, hey, I got a business to sell. Is anyone interested in it? So we were both looking at, broker deals, biz buy sell, whatever, independently. And we were also both combing Craigslist for businesses to buy in our area. And Joe had a post on Craigslist that was really, really well written, saying something like, hey, I'm a local entrepreneur looking to buy a company, message me. And so I did. I said, hey, I don't have a company to sell, but I'm trying to do the same thing in Indianapolis. You want to chat? And so, we met and we hit it off, right? We had common interests. We had kids who were similar ages, and then really just kept the conversation going from there. So we originally met on on Craigslist trying to find a deal. And full validation, we did wind up buying a company off of Craigslist down the road. So I feel like the thesis was validated there.
And to answer your question, Nick, I think we were in a position where we were both working full time at the time we met. Colin ended up being in that full time role for quite some time still, and I had stepped back and taken on some part time consulting contract type work. And when we decided to pull the trigger on the first business, it allowed me to dive into the business a little bit more. And Colin was still in his full time job and working on the side for a number of months until we were able to fully transition. So I think long term our goal was having a business should provide for us at some level. It's not going to replace our income on day one, but having some level of income from that business is helpful. And it allowed us to step into that where we didn't both have to take that immediate stance where we have to take a salary on day one from the business. And it allowed us over a period of months to really slide into that.
We almost treated it like a side hustle as we first were getting off the ground, like doing it on the side, seeing if we could work together, right? Having a partner was hugely valuable. And I know there's a lot of stuff to figure out in having a partner, and having a 50-50 partner nonetheless is a big commitment. But, we had very different worldviews, skill sets that we brought to the table. And we had been looking at deals for a while leading up to that first acquisition. So it was kind of a on the side type bet, really, to get things off the ground and just start working together and start climbing at it. And it was maybe like a full year and a half later that we said, hey, now that we've done this for a while, let's take the plunge and go buy enough to be able to jump in with both feet.
And when doing it solo, maybe you can share like for how long were you doing it before you got to know each other, number one, and number two, what was the feedback or a reaction from your partners that, hey, I met a guy on Craigslist, he wants to buy a business and we're gonna do it together now. So how was that period?
Yeah, well, I think the second question is a little easier. Feedback from our spouses was a little, they were skeptical.
So we just like make sure you're meeting each other in broad daylight, right? Like public place, lots of people around. Yeah.
And we're exploring something new anyway. I think talking to a spouse or a partner about quitting your job that has solid income coming in and saying that you want to go invest in a business, that's a challenging conversation for a lot of people anyway. So I think luckily we both have supportive spouses. We had already had them warmed up to that idea. And, Colin and I spent, as he said, probably a year together or more looking at businesses together. But by that time, we had learned that we each had different strengths. We had very long-term goals and values that were aligned, but we had different strengths. And I said, when I go in and I'm going to buy a business, I'm going to need someone like Colin to support me anyway. And I think Colin said the same about me. We just, we have very different mindsets in terms of how we operate. And even to this day, we find that we complement one another very well in that way. So it's been a really, really helpful partnership.
And if I may ask, and if you want to share, what about the initial contract between you two, and how was the structure wise? Did you invest the same amount of money in the first deal, or how was it? If you can share.
We decided to go 50-50, and I know that people say that that's a challenge and one person should have controlling share, but we said that, on the first deal we want to come in and we want to go 50-50, and that way we're both involved and there's no finger pointing or any of that. We're both on the hook for it. So as Colin said, it was challenging, but it went well from that. Our first business was a really challenging business to operate. It was a trucking business that ran in the middle of the night. So you ask, how did we get to know each other? How do we get to work together? And, a lot of those conversations happened at 2 a.m. in the morning or 4 a.m. in the morning when we're on the road driving trucks, or dealing with a broken down truck, or a driver who's been in an accident, or very real world scenarios that we got to see how one another operate. And I think over the lifetime of that business together, we learned that we really enjoyed working together. We really supported one another very well. And we really don't want to be in a trucking business. I mean, those are the 3 takeaways. So from that experience, I think what we learned is that being 50-50 worked for us. I don't think it works for everyone, but I think we were both at that point in our careers that we wanted to go long-term, make investments in small businesses, and grow something over time. So we developed Circle City Capital Group, our holding company, in a way that we could be flexible in that, and businesses could come in and out of that over time. But we decided that generally we want to, any venture we do together, we want to be 50-50 on, we want to be aligned. And at any point, if I share an idea and Colin says, no, that's crazy, it's not for me, then we walk away from it. And we do the same if Colin comes to me and suggests something and I'm not on board. It's something that I think, again, it keeps our long-term interest aligned by being 50-50 partners and having a really deep respect for one another.
Yeah, and we're not. Maybe it'll make it sound like we're sort of cavalier with our approach, but I think I've seen a lot of people overanalyze. I think there's a lot of overanalysis, right? And that'll prevent people from taking action. And so we didn't have this perfectly crafted partnership agreement and structure around, like, if this happens or if we have a disagreement or whatever, going into our first deal. I mean, we basically said, hey, it was a small deal. We'll each put up 50-50 capital, and we trust each other to be rational about it, to figure it out and see how that evolved over time. And we ultimately did get to, an agreement, actual operating agreement amongst each other. But, I think we've had this bias for action of, hey, we're just going to try some things, right? And if it doesn't work, then, we'll have a plan to exit that or get out of it. But I've seen a lot of people who overanalyze deals or overanalyze the idea of working with someone, right? Having a partner, and I think having a partner is massively beneficial, not just from like the capital standpoint, right? But like sharing the responsibility, having different yin yang work skills and things that you bring to the table, different viewpoint and things. So I'm a huge proponent of having a good partner and going down this path.
So the first acquisition, you found it from Craigslist. Can you share how did it work out? Because now I see you both sitting in comfortable offices. You're not driving a truck while doing this podcast, so a lot has changed. So take us please back to the first acquisition.
Well, it's 10 a.m. We wouldn't be in the trucks for another 12 hours, 14 hours anyway. But
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it worked out in a good way from a lot of perspectives. So things that were attractive about the business is it was a single client. So think about a FedEx type route where you're a contract driver or a contract service for a single route. So it was nice in the way that we stepped in and there was a business in place, and all we had to do was really staff those routes, provide the trucks, the equipment, things like that. So it was a relatively simple business to operate, which we enjoyed, and it produced cash flow on a weekly basis. We were paid weekly, we paid our drivers weekly, and it was very simple in and out. The only thing a little more challenging was then there's capital investment for your equipment. But generally, I think those things were simple and allowed us to easily understand it and scale that business. So we came into that business. We had 5 routes at the time that we took over, working and proving ourselves with that customer that we had. We were able to grow that business and eventually scaled to 10 or 11 routes doing the same. And throughout that period of time, it was challenging and definitely a strain on us, physically, time-wise, resource-wise. It was a challenging business to operate. But at the end of the day, I think we executed on the playbook, which was adding a middle-level manager in who could handle a lot of those tasks. So over time, we hired a manager. It was someone who was familiar with the trucking and logistics industry. She really took the reins of the operation, put hiring processes in place, beefed up our staffing and did all the right things. So it allowed Colin and I to step back from the business. So, different than some people in how they buy business, we walked in on day one and we were very much that owner operator. And over that next 12 months, we really had to work to put that manager in place. So we had penciled that out, sketched that out and said, this is the path to success. But actually pulling that off is still a challenge to do so.
Yeah, it was also, I mean, I think a key factor at the time, like we did it without debt. It was an all cash deal and it was really small. I mean, it was on the small end of the spectrum. So we each put up half the capital, bought the company, inherited some assets and everything. And like Joe said, the economic model was simple: get paid weekly, payments go out weekly for all of your expenses. There was no working capital, no AR, no inventory, no nothing, other than, having to maintain and repair and buy trucks. So it was a really simple business model. We bought it all cash. It was small. I mean, it was an investment that, if it had gone defunct, I don't think we would have been happy about it, but I don't think weren't going to lose our shirt either. So it was a good kind of toe dip way to figure out the business ownership process, right?
And what was the reason why the owner was selling the business?
The owner was selling the business because he was moving out of state. He had family out of state and had been here for a while and finally decided he needed to be with his parents who were aging. So I would say a pretty typical story in that way. He wasn't retiring himself, but he just wasn't the type of individual that felt like he could put the manager in place and operate remotely.
And the first acquisition, like your initial idea was already that you're going to build a portfolio of traditional businesses, or you were more with this mindset, like, let's just go deal by deal and see where we're going to end up in 4 or 5 years. So what was the mindset?
Yeah, I think we've been opportunistic from day one, right? I don't think we knew that we wanted to own multiple things. So even while we owned that, we were continuing to look at what else was out there, just because we both like looking at deals. We like looking at businesses. But I don't think we came into that first one even and said, yeah, we're going to own, 4 or 5 different things. We've been pretty opportunistic essentially from day one. So this was kind of, I almost view it as sort of a trial run, right? And I don't know that we knew that it was going to have a permanent home or not, but it was a good deal, a good opportunity, and gave us a chance to work together in what I thought was kind of a low risk way.
Did you have any moments like, okay, it's better to work and continue working in a Google, or you always had like, okay, this is what I expected. I love my life,
No, every day.
There was no loving life.
Yeah, I think especially in an industry like trucking, as we mentioned, we're working in the middle of the night. So you get a phone call at 2 a.m. that says a driver didn't show up. So Colin and I would go jump in a truck and drive 400 miles if we need to and make deliveries. We would get a call at 6 a.m. that a driver was in an accident, and we had to go pick up the driver and have the truck towed and arrange a new truck and things like that. We run into lots of different things that we didn't know. So even just we got a business credit card to to pay for our gas and things like that. But when you're filling up 5 or 10 trucks at a time, you're maxing out. You're running every type of fraudulent flag that you can on that card, and then you have to pull out cash and things to be able to do that. So every day you sit there and you say, "What am I doing? Why did I leave my job for this?" Absolutely. I don't know. I think the first day you walk in and you're pretty bright-eyed and excited about it, but it's a real struggle on a daily basis. I don't know what you think, Colin.
So and I think we walked in on day one, and literally we bought it, we closed. We're sitting at the BMV, transferring all the titles to all the trucks and everything. We're getting our licenses updated to be able to drive these 26-foot box trucks. And then we show up that first night, and I think 2 drivers called in sick or something on the first night. It's like, all right, here we go, right? Like, go time. Yeah, I mean, it's been valuable to every time you look at something, you got to be willing to do whatever the work is that needs to be done, right? And so I think that's sort of a key criteria in things that we would look at go forward, right? Like, are we willing to do whatever the work is? So whatever business you're buying, hopefully you are willing to jump in the truck, get out in the field, do whatever it is that you're servicing. But absolutely, I mean, it just wasn't a business that was really well suited to our skills at the end of the day, right? Like, for me, I can play around an Excel sheet pretty well, but when it comes time to like fixing up trucks and getting them started and getting them going, like, yeah, it really wasn't a good alignment of what we brought to the table. So,
But now you're happy, smiling here, sharing this experience. But what was the day to day when it comes to selling this idea to your spouses back then? Like, I mean, this is our life now. We
Yeah, I think I think we tried to convince them that we could do it on the side, right? And it's like, what's the adage? Making money while you're sleeping or something, like in maybe a literal sense for this one, right? And I think when we came into it, we thought the same thing, like, oh, we can put someone in place to manage the staffing and manage it and be pretty hands off. I think that was the original plan with it. It took a lot longer to make that a reality than we thought, but you know, yeah, going into it, it was definitely a situation of like, yeah, we can do this on the side and keep looking for the next thing and let this, spin up some cash at nighttime, and then we'll figure out what the next deal is when the time comes. Yeah.
So the next deal, did you already find it during this period of owning the first business, or you had this conversation? Okay, it's time to sell this business, and maybe you can share a bit of this journey of when did you decide it's good time to sell? Did you sell it to, and what was next?
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things about having a partner. We found ourselves in different scenarios where I remember getting a phone call from Colin where I'm driving a truck and I've been up all night, and Colin's saying, "Oh, there's a great deal. We should look at this one, right?" And we're just on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of I'm saying I just want to get back to be able to sleep through the night, and Colin's saying, "What's the next deal?" So I think it was a really positive, I would say, push and pull in that way, that we had those different experiences. And without Colin, I may still be driving trucks today. I think we'd have a really successful trucking company, but I don't know that we would have done everything that we've done. So I give Colin a lot of credit for that. And I don't recall the exact order, but I think maybe we went ahead and bought another deal before we had
Fully sold this thing. I think that's right.
I with this one.
Yeah, because we had just kept looking at stuff on the side, right? I still, even to this day, right? We're probably long on ideas, short on capital to go make them happen, but we just love looking at different businesses. So we had kept that momentum of looking at stuff going, and I think we did a string of maybe like 3 deals in like a 3 or 4 month span of time in late 2019. And we had already discovered those earlier in the year while we were running this trucking endeavor, for sure.
And these were also very small deals?
Yeah, one of them, well, I guess they were kind of medium. I don't know what's small, what the definition of small is anymore, right? But one of them was really small. It was maybe like 1.25 million in revenue, and we bought that in, what was that, like June of 2019, May of 2019, something like that. It was a little e-commerce Amazon business, and we paid, I want to say something like 125K for that business. So it was really, really small. And then in the fall of 2019, it was 2 million in revenue and 500K in revenue, but the 500K in revenue was accounting, so like much higher margins than product-based company. So yeah, there were still pretty small deals back then.
There were absolutely small deals, but I would say those 3 deals that we did at that time really set the platforms for some that we still own and operate today and roll up businesses on or tuck other additional businesses into.
We kind of said to each other when we were thinking about unwinding the trucking company and getting out of that business and saying, we still want to do this, we just want to do something else that was more suitable to lifestyle, skill set, whatever. And we made we made a pact. We said, hey, it's got to be big enough. We need to jump in with both feet. It's got to be big enough that it generates enough cash that can service the debt, pay ourselves a salary, and then have a little left over that we can keep, reinvesting and do more stuff, right? So we said what might take more than one deal or one larger deal. And I think we were more comfortable with the idea of owning more than one thing, as opposed to saying, let's go find one big deal and then just make sure you underwrite it really, really well. Because we didn't have we didn't have an industry background that said, oh yeah, we really know this industry super well and we can add a ton of value in this industry. We both were pretty much generalists at that point in time. So we said, yeah, okay, we're going to look at multiple things. It's just got to be big enough size, big enough cash flow that we can accomplish those 3 objectives.
And you were still on Craigslist, or now you were contacting brokers, or?
we'd graduated to looking at other stuff by then. Yeah.
I think those 3 deals all came through brokers, or at least 2 in the 3 did.
Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah.
And
I'd say there's a real estate agent. I remember that. Yeah.
And considering your knowledge, experience, skill set, what were the industries you looked at and what were you considering to get into, knowing that you can actually add some value and grow this business?
Yeah, I think we look at a lot of different industries. We're not really targeted in saying that we need a specific industry. I think there are industries that we'll say no to. So we've generally said we're not interested in investing in restaurants or certain niches that just aren't really something that we really want to work in these days. But generally, our investment criteria in looking at a business, we look at a business that operates today, and we think that it can continue operating in that same fashion. It would really cover the debt service and throw off some additional capital in doing so. But then we say, are there some levers that we could pull? Are there 4 or 5 different things that we could do where if 1 or 2 of those hits, then we see some growth? And if we're not able to grow it, then that's okay, as long as it's still, if we bought it right and it still operates as it was at the time that we bought it. So we're not as specific in terms of looking at an industry as we are saying, is there an opportunity here? So one of the businesses we looked at more recently was a business that there was no it was all paper-based accounting, right? It's someone spending 3 days a week going to the bank, and you're just sending a lot of physical checks. And they said, one of the levers for that business is we can automate the large portion of that to a couple hours a week versus a full-time job. So there should be some savings in that. One of the initial businesses Colin talked about that we purchased, it was a small e-commerce business, and we didn't get into it because it was e-commerce. We got into it because we said, well, this business is just located in the wrong place. So we picked it up and we moved it to another market that was a lot lower cost market, and we immediately dropped a lot of cash to the bottom line by doing so. So we look for opportunities like that we can make a significant change in the business that may make it more profitable and improve the operations. Those things are within our skill set to do. That doesn't mean that we're e-commerce experts or anything like that. We just look for those opportunities where there are a few of those levers that can pull, and if 1 or 2 of them works out, then we'll be doing a lot better than what the business was originally.
I think we've been more bottom up than top down in how we look at just about everything. I mean, I remember those 3 initial deals we did in 2019 that kind of set the stage for everything we have now. One of them was marketed by a real estate agent. It was marketed as a turnaround. It was 1.25 million in revenue, and they were asking for 125K for the whole business because they were breaking even. And we looked at it and said, oh, okay, it's an interesting product. They're selling on, it just happened to be selling online. They didn't call it an e-commerce company. And it was located in California. And so they had really, really high rent and fulfillment costs. They had an expensive team, and we just, we bought it and then put it all on trucks and moved it to a 3PL here in Indianapolis and really changed the cost structure of the company. And so that one was, again, kind of a small bet, but very much bottom up opportunistic. The second one in 2019 was close to us. It was maybe an hour and a half away, still is an hour and a half away. We still own that business today. And it was bigger, 2 million in revenue at the time that we bought it. It was kind of a niche product. And again, it wasn't really marketed as an e-commerce business. It was marketed as more of a, hey, here's this unique product, right? That's been around for a long time. And then the third was this bookkeeping and accounting firm. And the thesis there was, well, we're doing this work for ourselves anyway. Why not make it a revenue center as well, right? We can service our own businesses, and if we add anything to it, then we'll get that additional revenue stream, and then we can do it for other folks as well. So that was kind of the genesis of those 3 things that came together in late 2019, and just the thought process around each of them. It wasn't for some time later than that. I mean, now when we look at stuff, we want to find businesses that have been around for 30, 40 years, right? Long history. And really, we just want to pay a reasonable price for what it is today, like how they're operating today. And then if we can hold all the levers to change it, right, whether that's picking it up and moving it, or replatforming it, or making this change or that change or whatever, then ideally you want to keep all that upside to yourself for doing the heavy lifting. So.
And you mentioned paying a reasonable price. How much competition there is for the deals you're looking at and the ones you did back in 2019?
Yeah, I don't. Some of them, I don't know if they would have sold. At least the one out in California, I don't think it would have sold to anyone if we hadn't been interested in it. Um, the one that was here locally, I bet someone would have bought that company. Actually, so we had someone reach out to us the other day saying, "Hey, I actually looked at that business back when you guys were buying it." Um, so I think that ultimately would have sold, but I think it was brokered in a way that it was one thing and they were calling it something else. So I don't know that the right owner would have found that business, if that makes sense. And then the accounting firm, I think, was a nice little business and would have been bought by someone, but those businesses have gotten more popular in the last couple of years, it seems. Those virtual bookkeeping type operations.
But generally, we don't necessarily like to play in competitive markets too much. A lot of the businesses we look at are businesses that other people may not look at, and we want to be in a position where we're the only buyer, the only option for someone. It allows us to be in a little bit more control of that transaction and structure in a way that's favorable for us. So if we're in a situation and we're working with a broker and they say, well, there's multiple offers on the table and we're going to submit highest bids, like that's usually our cue to step.
Time to bow out.
No, thank you. So we've had scenarios like that happen where we say, no, thank you. We're not interested because of that. And then they come back to us 6 months later because they say, oh, the deal, the high end offer that we took, it fell through. Are you still interested? And say, well, yeah, we'll take a look at this point. But I think at this point, Colin and I have done enough deals that most of our deals are proprietary sourced, where being in an industry, we look for a lot of tuck-ins. We know who the players are in the industry, and we try to be friendly with them and talk to them and let them know that there's an acquisition opportunity. And then secondly, I think the thing we really bring to the table is we have a track record. We can get a deal done. And for someone who is selling their business, it's like selling a house or something. It's important, the price tag, but I think it's really important that they know that we can get a deal done, because selling a business is going to take 3 to 6 months from the time that you enter that contractual process. And us saying that, one, we can get through that. It's a lot of work. We're not going to back out. We have the resources to get it done. We have the funding to get it done. And at the end of the day, we're going to sit across you and we're going to write you the check that we promised you would. I think that means a lot for a business owner.
Yeah, that's good. I think we love looking at deals where there's like a crown jewel in it, and they might have multiple segments or multiple divisions or multiple channels they sell on or something. And we've done enough like changing the business model at this point that if you can buy something and really all you want is this one little thing that's tucked inside of it, and like get rid of everything else, and nobody's looking at it that way, those are super interesting. Super interesting. I mean, we bought, how many businesses have we moved, like put on trucks and moved at this point? Maybe four or five, something like that. Yeah. So like, oh, I love it. I love a deal where they're in like a high cost warehouse or something, and they're carrying inventory and just completely rejiggering the business model.
Do you always acquire majority?
We do. We have to date. I guess we've done control acquisitions and everything that we've done to date. I think we would do something in a minority position in the future. I don't think we need to be the guys who are operating the company. Most everything has been an SBA deal. Most of them. We did one friends and family round to buy a larger company, and there was some rollover equity in that as well, where the sellers held on to a minority position. And then we recently did a deal maybe about a year ago where the seller rolled some equity in that as well through an SBA loan. Yeah.
What are usually the expectations for the seller post acquisitions? Do they leave? Do they expect to continue running the business, or do you make some changes? How does it work post acquisition usually?
Yeah, we've never done an acquisition where we expect the seller to continue running the business. I think we would be open to it for the right scenario, but generally, the businesses we've looked at, it's generally been someone is retiring or interested in exiting the business. So, from our perspective, we usually arrange for 60 to 90 days of a transition period where we can learn from that person. They're engaged. They do introductions for key suppliers, employees, things like that, and really help us transition through that business. As Colin alluded to, we've had a couple of scenarios where the sellers have had some minority ownership in the business, or we have a seller note or something, and we found that to be helpful in the way that the sellers are aligned with us and want to see us be successful, so they're available and willing to be called on at a later time if we need to, in terms of maintaining a supplier relationship or something like that. But generally, involvement is really just we look for that brain dump. We look for the owner to provide all the information that they can during that short period of time to make sure that we can operate the business. I think for a lot of the businesses, we've found that period is actually less than what we anticipated to be. We usually write in 90 days of transition, but I think what we find is usually after about the first 30 days or so, we feel like we have a pretty good handle on the business and the industry. And I think a lot of times the owner may struggle with some of those transition ideas that Colin talks about, in terms of, they can't understand how the business could be operated in a different location than it is today, or they don't understand how, there's a piece of the business that we're not really interested in and we're going to discontinue that. So we try to be upfront about those things. And I think, when you're sitting across the table and you're on the receiving end of a big check, it's understandable that you can agree to those. But I think what we found is long term, the owner is not capable or willing to think about those moves in the same way that we would. I think that's something that would really discourage us from buying a business and having the owners stay on with us long term. A lot of times they're just not able to think about the business in a way differently than they have. And oftentimes that's required as we enter a new chapter for the business.
I think 9 times out of 10, they've been in their like mid to late 70s, right? Age of seller, and so that's and in some cases husband wife team. That's really been kind of the sweet spot, I guess, in the type of business being transitioned. So been around for a long time, right? Maybe they did not successfully transition into like a digital world or digital mode of operation, and so they're looking to move on from that point, retire. So that's where we've come into the picture in almost all the deals we've done.
So today it's December 2024. What is the track record today? How many businesses have you bought? How many have you decided to sell? And what is your thought process behind buying a business, building and improving the business, and then selling it, or keeping the business in the portfolio?
Yeah, go ahead.
We've done 14 acquisitions to date. And what we've decided to sell, we've decided to sell only a couple of the businesses. One, we sold the trucking company just because we said that's not a good industry. It's not suitable for our lifestyle. And then secondly, we sold the accounting business that Colin referenced. It was an accounting bookkeeping type of service. And we had done a roll-up of 3 of those different services. And I think at that stage, we found that business was just a little bit more hands-on and demanding than we had hoped for. It wasn't scaling the way that we wanted it to at the time. And we had needs for other, I guess, funds, right? So we wanted to take those funds and redeploy them. So we sold that business to the management of that organization, and they still operate that today. Other than that, everything that we've acquired, we've held on to. And when we look at a business, our intent is not to flip a business. It's not to buy it for a short period of time and resell with added gains there. We generally want to buy a business that we'd be happy to own 10 years from now and is still successful in operating. So generally, since it is our cash that we're putting into it, we're in a position that we're able to hold for a long period of time. And we're incentivized to do so because I think, a lot of businesses, we see long-term growth potential for them. Businesses, we've talked about selling them. The only reason we would do so at this point is because we really need the capital to invest in something else. We think we can get a better return taking that money elsewhere. Or if there's just an offer that we can't refuse.
Yeah, if like a strategic approach or something. Yeah.
So you've looked at tons of businesses, done 14 acquisitions. What are some of the industries you avoid? I mean, trucking probably one of them, but even though you could find another extremely good deal on a trucking industry, would you do it knowing what's ahead, or you would be like, okay, no, we're not gonna get into this again?
I hope we have the same answer on that one.
I think we would avoid trucking at this time. I think there's plenty of good deals out there for industries that we enjoy a little bit more. So we would avoid trucking. We would avoid restaurants. But again, like there's always potentially a caveat, right? We don't really want to be in the restaurant business, but if we had an opportunity to own 4 or 5 franchises at their restaurants, we might consider that. It's not at the top of our list, but again, as Colin suggested, we're pretty opportunistic. So if we think there's a lever there that we can pull that makes sense, where there's long-term value creation opportunity, then we'll still look at it. But generally, independent restaurants, bars, gas stations, convenience stores, those types of things we're going to shy away from. Colin, feel free to add to the list.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I almost, instead of thinking about it like industries, I think we maybe think about it by like characteristics, right? And like try to avoid just commodity stuff, right? So if we can find something that's niche or has some unique element to it, right? Maybe like a branded product that's been around for a long time, or some kind of exclusivity, right? Whether that's through a supplier, or we bought a company with kind of a sweetheart supplier relationship, which really helped in that business. So just some form of unique advantage on the quantitative side. I almost think about it more on the quantitative side. And we like to avoid companies that are growing fast, right? So we actually like to steer clear of rapid growth, rapidly growing companies. I'd prefer to see a company that has essentially flat revenue for like 5 years straight, just very, very stable with minimal volatility. That would be really interesting to us. That long tenure, long history. So company that's been around for 20, 30, 40 years, maybe a really valuable customer database that they haven't done anything with or haven't used. A company that hasn't modernized at all, right? Like, so really manual processes or really paper-based. And so it's hard to go tell someone, here's my criteria when it's stuff like that. But when you start peeling back the layers and you find those things, that's where it can get really, really interesting.
Yeah, we look at those. We look at opportunities to combine businesses that are in a similar geographic area, right? If we had a business that was installing fences and there's 2 or 3, within a similar geographic area, we'd look at rolling those into a single operation. Again, as Colin suggested, we're pretty opportunistic. We like to find unique ways to create value that are outside of the traditional just customer acquisition path.
So when it comes to managing it all, how do you do that? Does each of the firm has its own CEO, or you have separated yourself from those businesses, or how involved are you with each, and how do you manage it all, pretty much?
It's a great question, and it's not an easy answer. It's not real clean at this point. Similar to the trucking business, we started on day one, and we were owner-operators, and we were very much involved in the business and getting our hands dirty. Over that time, we eventually worked into being more of an owner or an investor in the business with a manager in place. I'd say all of our businesses are somewhere on that spectrum right now. We will buy a business that we have to replace the owner. And a lot of times on day one, that means Colin and I are doing a lot of those activities and doing the heavy lifting. And then we eventually try to install a manager or a management team in place to do that. But generally, that's not something we bring to the table at the time of the acquisition. So I'd like to say that most of our businesses have someone that I would call at least a general manager who operates day to day. We still heavily support some of those businesses, and from Colin's perspective, he still does a lot of the finance work and the long-term outlook and forecasting to help support a GM who may not have that type of experience. I still jump in and get my hands dirty on different businesses when I need to. And it looks like different things for different businesses. As Colin said, we've moved a lot of warehouses, and when we move a warehouse, that's usually Colin and I on the ground lifting boxes, filling a truck, driving a truck at times, doing what needs to be done. We do that. We've done some different things in a manufacturing process as we need to. We do different things. If it's an e-commerce business, we'll jump in and we'll do an inventory analysis, and we'll send out an email to drive some revenue for slow moving inventory. We'll do anything that needs to be done because it's our business and our asset. Ideally, we have at least a general manager or more of a CEO or management team in place. But some of our businesses just they haven't grown to that level to really have that, or we don't have the right person in place yet. So I'd say people is a continual challenge for us.
I think critical mass is a real thing, right? And so having a bigger company allows for the owner of that company to wear fewer hats in the business and be able to like appropriately partition out the roles. So we've got we call it four groups of businesses today and several brands within each of those groups. And our largest is much larger than the other three. And so it has, call it a full management team of people responsible for each department within that business. So I would say that one's pretty, well management run. The other three, two of them have a GM, right? A general manager in place. And then we kind of support that person with whatever skill set they're missing. And then the smallest one, which is a recent acquisition, I essentially sit in that seat, and Joe's kind of the support role in helping market that, handle some of the operational sides of it. So ideally, you have at least some kind of a GM, someone to button up the ops and make sure that the ops are running smoothly, and then we can round out marketing mindset and the finance and accounting piece until they get to that size where you can afford having like a real management team handling each of those different areas.
What is the size of Circle City Capital Group today? You built it for 5 years. Where are you today?
Probably just shy of 30 million in revenue on a combined basis. Headcount, oh man, I don't know if I know the total headcount. It might be around 200 employees, but a big chunk of that is going to be production employees and retail staff we have brick and mortar stores and we have manufacturing. So, there will be a big piece of folks attributed to that. So yeah, probably around there.
When you started, did you have like a specific number or something in mind? Like when we achieve it, we've made it, we feel good, we can maybe sell it, whatever, or you still feel that you go week by week and you have so much to do?
I don't think we have that. I think we have goals in terms of what what our business will allow us to do. So a lifestyle that we want to lead. And I wouldn't say Colin and I are interested in something that's overly lavish or anything in terms of lifestyle, but I think we want our business to provide for us and offer us some level of flexibility. And we're not there yet, but I think we're on our way to doing so, and that's really exciting. That being said, we recognize the business we built, being a holding company with interest in a number of different industries, both private and public. We're not likely to find a buyer for that, right? We're not buying it with the intention of exiting that as a whole. I think something that was really appealing to both Colin and I, we're both those individuals that we're not going to retire, right? We're still young, we still have a lot going on, and even if we had the financial ability to retire, we do this because we're interested in it, and we're going to continue doing so for a long period of time. So I think as time goes on, we may cycle through some of the companies that we have and sell them, when it's the appropriate time to do so. But I think we have, our vehicle, our holding company, that we can continue to invest in different things. And at different times, it may be more heavily weighted on public markets than private investments, and vice versa. I think it's just, again, as Colin said, we're opportunistic. We want to go where the money is and where we can best utilize our skills and our resources. So it is something that's flexible over time. We don't see the ability to have like a full exit of our holding company. That's just not something that we would recognize as being in the cards for us. But as we've done today, we have sold a couple of businesses when it made sense to do so. And I think we would continue down that path and say if there's something that is less interesting to us than it was 5 years ago when we bought it, we'd be interested in exiting that. Or as Colin said, if it's something that there's a strategic that wants to pay a lot more money for it, then we'd be open to that. Those types of conversations I think are generally on the table, but that's not where we focus our time and energy. I think we focus our time and energy on finding a good business, buying a good business, and then operating what we have today.
Yeah, I think we like the businesses that we own. They're all very niche and have good runways for the next 10 plus years, and many of them have good acquisition runways too, like to keep adding on to them. So we would look at a deal in any industry that we're already in. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. But I think it's more from a goal standpoint. It's not like, hey, we want to get to 100 million and then sell or something like that. I think we enjoy the process, enjoy the journey, which is a big piece of it. From my standpoint, I think it's more about you building in the flexibility to work on the things that you enjoy working on and where you add value. And I think that's what we're trying to skate toward more than anything, right? Is to get all of them in a position where Joe and I can add value where we add value, as opposed to like, running email campaigns or managing PPC or whatever, right? So it's about being able to skate toward that more than anything else. And I think we'll keep bolting onto it. I think the bar is higher today than it was 5 years ago for what would be like a new platform to join, right? Like its own leg to the stool. But we like the 4 businesses that we're in today. We would add to them, and I think we'd look at other stuff, and we've got other things on the docket. Yeah.
You're still young, the company is still young, even though you've gone through a lot. You haven't seen too many cycles, but you've seen COVID. So how was this time for you? I'm asking because I spoke to a lot of business owners, and especially the ones who started 2018, 19, 20, even 21. And the first serious thing happened was COVID. And the ones who survived, they said this was the toughest time ever, especially for guys who was in a hotel industry or restaurants, or even though some of them who had a lot of debt. So how was this period for you, and how were you able to survive?
We were really fortunate during COVID to have exposure to e-commerce, right? So we rode some of that wave. We came into the picture in, call it, mid to late 2019. So this was pretty shortly after we had made a flurry of acquisitions. So fortunately, we were almost a fully remote company at the time that it happened. We had e-commerce exposure, which helped significantly. I think the more challenging aspect has been this like post-COVID timeframe of like what's normal, right? What does a normal year look like? And businesses that are for sale or were for sale in that like 2022 to 2023 timeframe, you look at them and you're like, oh man, what is like a normal year actually look like, right? Some of them had these big demand spikes, and so revenue skyrocketed, and now it's coming down, or they paid a ton of money for inventory, or they're sitting on a ton of inventory. So it's almost been more challenging from a buyer standpoint to look at a business and say, yeah, what does a normal year look like? And maybe 2024 is closer to normal than it has been recently. But for us, we were fortunate to have some exposure to e-com and had pretty minimal disruption other than on the cost side, right? I mean, I think the cost of inventory, cost of importing, things like that were significantly more expensive.
I will say I do think we're fortunate in that we had acquired businesses and looked at a lot of things. A lot of our businesses are very inventory-centric businesses. And when we acquired a number of the businesses, we usually go through this process of saying, wow, there's some aged inventory here. What do we do with this? So I would say we're hypersensitive or hyper aware of aged inventory. And coming out of COVID, I think we're seeing a lot of businesses struggle because they did a lot of purchasing and just expected those trends to continue. I think we're fortunate enough that we are extra sensitive to inventory and making sure that we're at the right level and we're not buying too much or over investing in inventory. So it's allowed us to come out of COVID a lot easier, where we've seen top line revenue drop. We've been able to pull back our inventory in sync with that, versus a number of other business owners that we know or that we see that they're out ahead of their skis, where they just bought too much. They're sitting on the inventory, and now their business is in a really painful position.
Yeah, I remember we were having calls regularly during that time frame, and I was really worried about it because revenue is climbing quickly, and we are sort of firm believers in like slow and controlled growth. We're not trying to grow like 50% a year or anything like that in any of our businesses. Like, just keep it in maybe a 5 to 10% annual growth territory, nice and easier to manage. And when COVID was happening, revenue was climbing, and I remember calling Joe regularly and saying, man, what do we do from a purchasing standpoint? Like, is this the new baseline, or like, do you anticipate that it'll come back down and normalize? And I mean, those were big decisions, because you're talking about purchasing, 3 to 6 months out for a lot of the products that you're buying. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think there was a lot of luck involved in that time frame, and I think we managed through. Like, we could have overbought and torpedoed some of the businesses that we were in. So I don't know. Very fortunate. Knock on wood.
So industry expertise wise, you're involved in different industries. How has it been? I mean, the thought process when getting into a new industry, you didn't know a thing about trucking, I guess, before getting into this and getting this experience and the lessons. Maybe they were painful enough, maybe not. So in the future, how was your thought process of when getting into specific industry? Like, how were you able to learn as fast as possible, and what was maybe the ways you were able to learn about specific industry? If you get the question, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we probably have different answers for this, but I think something that we have that is valuable for us is that we're not private equity, right? We don't have a lot of cash that needs to be deployed, and we don't have a management team that's going to step in and then we sit back and we're just looking at quarterly results for a business. Since we are still more owner-operators, we're heavily involved in each business. So at the time of transition, we sit across the table and we sign the papers and write the check. And then for the next 90 days, we are living and breathing that business. And it forces us to get to know that industry and ask the questions. We walk into every business knowing that we are the least educated in the room about that business and how it operates, and generally about that industry as well. So we go through those cycles of spending time sitting next to employees, understanding what their job is, understanding why they do it, and learning those intricacies of the business and being able to ask all the questions to better understand the industry that we're in. So it's probably more hands-on than a lot of people that are just looking to invest in a business want to be. But again, as Colin referenced, we look for these niches. We look for businesses that are going to be around for 10 or 20 years still, and have a lot of staying power. So we're generally not looking for too many of the larger, broader industry trends, because we're not trying to necessarily capitalize on those. We're saying there's already a good product, there's already a good service that's in place. We just need to continue the momentum that's there and really build by 5 to 10% a year. It seems reasonable to do that versus looking at all these larger industry trends.
Yeah, I guess from a philosophical standpoint, like I think we believe that nothing is insurmountable. Like most everything is learnable outside of maybe like a professionally licensed organization. In that case, you probably would want like a partner or like a deep bench to join you for that. So I don't know. We've never actually formally acknowledged this with each other, but I think, Joe, we probably both recognize that we can learn most things or figure out what the key factors or key variables are. But yeah, that immersion, getting to know it, getting really familiar with it so that you can step into that seat if the day comes, is important. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just a believer that we can learn most business models, right? And we try not to rock the boat too much when we come into the picture, unless we're buying something and saying like, hey, we really just want this one thing and we're going to shed the rest of this, or we're going to pick it up and move it. And that might mean a new or different team, or a team that was physical on site and is moving to a remote workforce. So yeah, I think we try to minimize the disruptive change on day one, at least until we can get our arms around what do you actually have.
I think I just got the biggest lesson from you, this attitude you have, and I guess the advantage over other. Not saying you're competing with someone other than yourself, but the advantage you have is you're willing to do the work and you're not afraid of doing the work and you're hands-on. So my question is, the 90-day period enough to get the basic understanding of running the business, how the industry works, or sometimes you feel you would probably need a bit more, maybe it's half a year, and then you make a decision that, okay, Colin or Joe, so I have to spend more time in this business, in this industry, to really get into it?
I think from my experience, that 90-day period is really telling, and typically has been enough for us. It is, as you probably experienced, Mick, it is drinking from the fire hose going through a scenario like this. So you live and you breathe it for a period of 60 or 90 days. I think it is enough. And generally what we found, even with, if we're already in an industry acquiring a business, one of our most recent acquisitions, I would say I embedded myself in the business for the first 30 days. And by the end of that time frame, I felt pretty good about it. Do I know everything about it? Absolutely not. But I know the key employees. I know what they're doing. I know what their responsibilities are. I know who the suppliers are. I know what levers we're going to pull. And I walked out of that business saying, okay, I understand this. It makes sense. And I know where we're going from here. And then it allows me to step back and focus on the larger picture things that we say now, how are we going to drive this additional 5 to 10% revenue? Do we have the right capital structure in place to support the growth that we need? And look at some of those broader things. So I think from my perspective, if it's a brand new business or platform, I do think that 90-day period is probably sufficient. You obviously don't go through all the seasonality. You don't go through, all the ins and outs with the longer term trends that you may see for some businesses. But generally, I think that it's enough time for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, this is where the partnership model really has huge benefits too, because it shortens that learning curve, right? Like you're doubling the effort and you're coming back to the table saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm seeing. I mean, you just shorten that learning curve by so much. And you have that like, hey, here's where I think we should be focused, here's where I think we should be focused, and you've got that back and forth conversation, which is immensely valuable. Yeah.
What is your thought process and how has it been for you? Because 5 years now, you've been into this, you work in long hours. How have you paid dividends, or what is the thought process of should we reinvesting the profits for another 10, 15 years? What is I guess the question is about the lifestyle, like how much have you improved that and what is your idea for the next 5, 10 years? And are you on the same page with this?
Yeah, so I think we're on the same page. Yes, we take what I would call a modest salary and then reinvest most everything back into the business and just continue to redeploy. And we've notched that up a little bit along the way, but we're not emptying the business with distributions or anything. I'd say just about every dollar is getting reinvested back into the company. If we had I liken it to, if you had a big asset sale, right? If we sold one of the holdings and we had this big check come back our way, like if we took that to each other personally, I think we would say, okay, great, now we got this, like, why don't we just go partner up and do it again, right? So I think as long as that mindset exists of continuing to want to, look at things and invest in things and buy things, I think that reinvestment makes a ton of sense.
One more question about the future. You're happy, you're excited, you've seen a lot, you have some scars on your back. What is the next 2 or 3 years? What it's going to bring for you?
Yeah, I'd have to say that the next 2 or 3 years, we're likely going to look into taking on some additional capital. As Colin suggested, we've done so with a single friends and family round in the past, and it's been good. It's been a good way to allow us to purchase a business that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to purchase. But we are at a point that we've grown and we've really, our earnings are going back into our businesses to grow, which is good. But we have a large opportunity set that's out there. So we have a number of people who have expressed interest in investing in a fund or some similar structure that will allow us to access some additional capital. So I think here in the next 12 to 18 months, we will form something to allow that to happen and really allow us to accelerate both on the platforms that we have today as well as the future investments that we want to make. So I think that's the next big step for us, is going from something where it's really just been our money to taking on some additional investors and taking on some partners for the ride.
I think as we've gotten more comfortable with doing this, right? Like most people, we started out saying, "Oh, we got to own 100% of it. We got to own, we got to own it all." And I think we've evolved that thinking over time to say, yeah, would we partner with someone on something? Absolutely. Would we be minority partners on something? Absolutely. And so we're long on ideas and maybe short on capital, I guess is how I would describe it. And we feel comfortable with our process and how we find things and how we get them closed and how we bring them into the fold and manage them. So yeah, I think it's something that we'd like to do more, right? And if we can partner with people to do more, then I think that sounds great because we enjoy the process.
Okay, so let's wrap up with the famous 5 very short answers. How old are you?
I'm 41.
37.
Favorite book?
I'm going to say Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Oh, that's a really good one. Oh, man. I like this book called Simple Numbers by Greg Crabtree.
What car do you drive?
I drive a 2012 Nissan Rogue.
2015 Subaru Forester.
We invest in our business, not in our cars, right?
I can see that. I can see that. What's the best investment advice you've ever got?
Best investment advice is probably that you will need more money to get your deal done than you expect.
Was that my advice to you?
Maybe.
No. Yeah, something along those lines of like you got to stay in the game to keep playing the game, right? So like liquidity matters, right? Having resources matter a lot.
And the last part,
Mass. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
you can add something. Sorry.
Yeah, I got two, right? You got to stay in the game. You need to have you need to have good resources and good liquidity available to you. But critical mass is such a real concept, right? Like as your company gets bigger, it can actually you go from this team of generalists to a team of more specialists, right? People who know how to do this one specific thing or this one area. It's been massively beneficial in one of our businesses. So it's a very real concept. The larger a company gets, the better it can survive and do the things it needs to do.
And as you've been so transparent with everything, I'm sure many people would like to reach out because you've been very open about the numbers, the deals you've done, the early days, I think, which often break us or make us. In your case, it made you stronger, and I can see you gonna build this for many years. So where can people find you?
Yeah, it's best just to find us on our website, circlecitycapitalgroup.com. It's a bit of a mouthful, but we have contact information on there, and someone can connect with us on LinkedIn or contact us through our contact form. We're always happy to speak with other entrepreneurs, investors, anyone who's really interested in the space.
Okay, Colin and Joe, honestly, I really enjoyed, and I'm happy that you said yes during this Christmas time. So thanks a lot for doing this, and best of luck building your business.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Enjoyed our time together. Take care.